on camera during that, then by all means just put your question or comment into the chat box. Now, right, yes, finally recording started. Tried that a couple of times, and there we go. So yeah, thank you everyone for the participation that you've all really put into this. I've got that kind of last night at a Butlins holiday sort of feeling, and this is the final evening's entertainment. Of course, there are things that just can't be replicated in a virtual conference, and it is a shame that we haven't had actual personal face-to-face contact. Really, usually one of the most important things of doing a conference, but I hope that people do stay in touch with each other. I'm extremely interested in everyone who's been talking, I mean, especially about time. Personally, I'm actually developing a research project on time in cinema, and I would love to hear more from those of you who are working in similar areas. And I hope that people will be able to stay in touch with each other and keep the conversations going. I've been spending the last few days wondering where conferences are going to go in the future, if we are going to continue justifying to each other paying, traveling from one continent to another to give a 20-minute paper or not. I've got absolutely no idea where conferences are going to go after COVID. I think there's loads of benefits of online. There's loads of benefits of a face-to-face conference, and there's kind of Helen Wheatley put a very interesting Twitter thread out there about the various drawbacks alongside the benefits. The problem is that the benefits of online are completely incompatible with the benefits of face-to-face and vice versa. So where conferences go, I don't know. I also don't have anything particularly clever to say by way of summary or reflection on the papers that have been given over the previous few days. And in terms of the speakers that we've got this afternoon, well, I mean, we started with, strangely enough, with a conference wrap-up, seeing as I'd already seen all the presentations back on Wednesday. And I feel like we're closing with opening things up. The reason for choosing the 5 speakers who we've got here with us today is really to show the diversity of different kinds of approaches, the range of ways that both the body or time, or the body and time together, can be considered in film, in television, and in screen studies. I don't know to what extent there's going to be overlapping themes and things that we can draw together, or to what extent it's going to be up. I'm very much looking forward to everyone's participation. So, without any further ado, we'll start off with Dr. Deborah Jermyn. Dr. Deborah Jermyn is reader in film and television at the University of Roehampton, where she's also the research degrees convener for media, culture and language. She's author and editor of 11 books, including Female Celebrity and Aging, Back in the Spotlight, which was with Routledge in 2013, and with Sue Holmes, Women, Celebrity and Cultures of Aging, Freeze Frame, that was with Palgrave in 2015. Most recently, she co-edited Love Across the Atlantic, US-UK Romance in Popular Culture with EUP last year, and she continues to work on representations of aging, gender and identity across media. So Deborah, over to you.
Many thanks, Louis, and thanks to everyone at BAFTSS for inviting me to be part of this closing roundtable. I'm really honoured to be a part of it. Louis, I've already discovered from my test run that I couldn't get my image to show, so if you're able to share that when I need to, just at the end, that would be great. There's just one picture I want to share with everyone today.
Okay, great. I'll hold that now. Okay. Let me know when.
Yeah, will do. Brilliant, thank you. So I was approached to take part in this conversation as a film and TV scholar who's worked for a decade now on representations of ageing and older women in the media, often through the lens of star studies and celebrity studies. Now, I've already used a contentious phrase there in invoking the term older, and it's become commonplace in film and TV and cultural studies, as these fields have belatedly started to devote more attention to questions of later life ageing, to problematise this language, even while inevitably adopting it, since, as we can all agree, the term older is subjective, context specific, and mutable. Sorry, yeah, taking the image off for now. But as this conference has underlined, just as we may have different conceptions of what old or older mean, so too might we have different conceptions of time. And when we revisit our presumptions about time, we may find that we might reconfigure our presumptions about aging. Now, usefully, particularly so for people like myself who aren't from a film philosophy background, Ross Jennings and Ivo Kronitsky in their work on Call the Midwife reminds us that before monochronic linear chronological time became the dominant Western model, models of time included kairotic time, which might be conceived of as cyclical, experiential or felt time, and Augustinian time, involving the experiential integration of an interrelation of the past, present, and future. Some aging studies scholars suggest that an openness to alternative models of time offers a more productive means of understanding the processes of aging than mere chronological time can. We might also say that they can work to enrich our grasp of the negotiations at stake in aging stardom, and in particular, aging female stardom. Always embedded in discussion of aging women's stars is the assessment of whether they are aging well or aging badly, ideally perhaps becoming ageless, based on an evaluation of how successfully they are perceived to be evading this expected signifiers of advancing chronological time. And it seems to me that often my work and others doing similar kinds of research on aging women's stars has essentially involved examining the kinds of collision of conceptions of time and of age that the bodies and star personas of these women must publicly negotiate. As women's stars age over time in the public eye and move into that tenuous territory of becoming older women, if they're perceived to be aging well, then their chronological or calendar age is situated as somehow confounding or being in tension with other alternative estimations of aging, such as biological age, social age, or psychological age. At the same time, these stars, by virtue of having had their aging archived in public, embody a kind of heightened negotiation of non-chronological conceptions of time. Lynn Segal writes that for all of us, aging can bring with it temporal vertigo, an evocative phrase which challenges the relentless linearity of monochronic conceptions of time, in which one feels one's aging self to be, as she puts it, psychically, in one sense, all ages and no age, as we retain traces of all the selves we have been. For aging women's stars, constantly confronted with, reminded of, questioned about, and evaluated against representations of their younger selves in and out of character, one can only imagine the acute sense in which this temporal vertigo must be felt. Now, there are clearly all kinds of further significant inflections and contexts that I don't have time to attend to here, including, of course, how a very particular type of female star, namely a white, cisgendered, able and slim-bodied, heteronormative one, tends to be held up as the clearest embodiment of aging well. But I want to end now with an image encapsulating some of this and the multiple ways in which questions of time and aging are wrought across the female star's body. The image combines real actor and character Carrie Fisher at a fan convention signing a photo of her much younger self playing Princess Leia. And I turn to this to end as a picture which in many ways crystallizes Segal's conception of temporal vertigo. In her memoirs, The Princess Diarist, Fisher wrote candidly about her discomfort and distaste at taking part in these signings, referring to them as her selling lap dances. And I find her reflections on these events and on forever being asked to sign photos of her 19 or 25-year-old self really striking in relation to the themes we're considering today. And so I'll end with her words. That souvenir, now yours forever, captures two instants, the long ago one when the photo was taken, and the more recent one when that signature was written just for you. I sit there in front of all these different pictures of myself from a million years ago. I don't remember when these photos were taken or who the photographers were. Now the reaction I sometimes get is disappointment, occasionally bordering on resentment for my having desecrated my body by letting my age increase so. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Sorry, slight delays here while I switch between screens and so on. Well, thank you very much for that, Deborah. And let me now go straight on to our second speaker, who's Professor Mandy Merck. Professor Mandy Merck is Professor Emerita of Media Arts at Royal Holloway, University of London. Her latest book is Cinema's Melodramatic Celebrity, Film, Fame and Personal Worth, being published by BFI Bloomsbury. Previous books also include Hollywood's American Tragedies, Eisenstein, Sternberg, Stevens, In Your Face, 9 Sexual Studies and Perversions, Deviant Readings. Her edited collections range from Queer and Gender Theory, Coming Out of Feminism, Further Adventures in the Dialectic of Sex, to National Identity, America First, Naming the Nation in US Film and the British Monarchy on Screen. Topical, given today's news. So, Mandy, I would very, very much like to welcome you. Let me know what you want me to do with the PowerPoint slides. I think you're possibly currently muted.
Am I? I tried not to be.
You're good.
Am I okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Okay. This conference has been astonishingly beautiful and smooth, suave. Maybe not for you behind the scenes, but very impressive for me. And I can hardly live up to it. Because this is a kind of look back, I want to say that the remarks I'm making now have some affinity with Isabella Roccamora's discussion of Arnek Meek's installations and the way that male figures seem to fall out of time, with Helena Basil-Morozo's thoughts on Tim Burton's disassembled characters, and Anat Ayalon's discussion of timelessness and spacelessness in films about migration, and everything everybody said about aging, including Deborah's remarks just now. But I'm not going to talk about the avant-garde. I'm going to talk about 2 Hollywood films. The Incredible Shrinking Man, made in anticipation of nuclear catastrophe, and a later one made in anticipation of climate catastrophe, Downsizing. In Jack Arnold's 1957 film, Scott, a suburban advertising man exposed to nuclear fallout, shrinks to about 3 feet tall. An antidote is discovered, but it stops working. Every day, he says, in what is a journal that he keeps, which becomes the necessary voiceover throughout the entire second half of the film, because one of the things about getting very small is no one can hear you. Every day, he says, it was worse. Every day, a little smaller. He takes refuge in a doll's house, but the family cat, who's called Butch, as significantly, I think, chases him out of it into the basement where he's trapped, fighting off a huge house spider, and eventually becomes so small he can climb out of the screen meshes in the basement screen. He emerges into the starlit night and contemplates his fate in a voiceover indebted to Pascal's discussion of the infinite, remarkably indebted for a 1957 sci-fi film. I was continuing to shrink. To become what? The infinitesimal? What was I? Still a human being? Or was I the man of the future? So close, the infinitesimal and the infinite, the unbelievably small and the unbelievably vast eventually meet, like the closing of a gigantic circle. I looked up as if somehow I would grasp the heavens, the universe, worlds beyond number. The final shot rises up above the grass, obscuring his tiny body, and dissolves into the Milky Way and then into a mushroom cloud, with the end title contradicting Scott's voice, still proclaiming, "To God, there is no zero. I still exist." Flash forward 60 years, to Downsizing, directed by Alexander Payne in 2017. In order to prevent eco-collapse, a team of biologists pioneered the cellular reduction of human beings to 1/14 of average size, which would make the average adult man about 5 inches tall. It becomes a commercial success, even more than a scientific success. People start to do it in order to enhance their ability to buy stuff with their former full-sized money. 10 years later, after a new methane release in the Arctic, however, the scientists announce that their initiative has come too late. One of them says in another one of these long speeches, characteristic perhaps of the expository needs of this genre, it is now an actuarial certainty. Let's see if we've got that here. No matter how the end will come, environmental disaster, pandemic disease, unbreathable air, impotable water, not enough food, nuclear winter, some combination of them all, relatively soon the earth will indeed purge itself of all human life. Well, while we're waiting for that, the film's protagonist, played by Matt Damon, has become small himself. He's a middle-aged, middle-class, Midwestern, very middle physiotherapist, and he's had himself shrunk to buy a luxury house in the miniature town of Leisureland, a very Debordian consumer spectacle with tremendous Leisureland references to La La Land and Hollywood. Or Leisureland, in which Laura Dern plays the happy housewife, enjoying the wealth that is brought by becoming 1/14 of your size. And Paul buys a very Disney-esque luxury house, which we've already seen is about a 2-foot-long model in actual size, and arrives at it, and the little man in the car is 5 inches tall, to give you some idea, right?
Do you want me to share the PowerPoints at all?
Sorry, can you not see it?
No, we've just got your camera showing you at the moment. It might be easier if I upload them, perhaps.
Okay.
It'll take me a second.
Right.
So it could take quite a few seconds. It might be worthwhile you continuing just while I try and get this up.
Okay. There are only a few images in what is largely an expository talk. So if you get there, it's about image 8. I'm going to go on to image 9. Okay. So there's Matt Damon in this town of Leisureland. Rather like a Disney-esque gated community, and he's not satisfied. His life still seems purposeless. He's lost his consumer riches in a divorce that's happened because his wife didn't want to follow him to Leisureland. He ends up working at Land's End, which is not the least of the puns in this film. And he decides to join the biologists who devised this shrinkage process in an underground colony where they plan to exist for 8,000 years in order to save the human species from extinction until the Earth is cool enough to reemerge on its surface. But instead of living in the vault at the last moment, he changes his mind and runs out to spend the rest of his life with the woman he loves, caring for others in a scaled down world of human need, a sort of downsized version of It's a Wonderful Life. The final shot shows him running into the rainy night after taking dinner, to an elderly Hispanic migrant. So I'll just get to the point. In The Incredible Shrinking Man, the irradiated body of the hero becomes smaller with the passage of time, much against his will. Time and the body are finite until, in the character's imagined transcendence, they both dissolve into the infinity enclosing them materially and temporally. In Downsizing, the man of the future is voluntarily sacrificed. By 92%, his body is sacrificed for material gain, a higher standard of living in leisureland, while conserving resources to enable his species to survive the passage of time, the relatively soon in which life on the surface of the earth will end. In both films, the spatial reduction of the body measures the threat to its duration. As Bergson admits, we are compelled to borrow from space the images by which we describe what we feel about time. In other words, lifespan. Now, thus perhaps both protagonists seek refuge from a temporal threat of extinction in a defined space. Space is the solace of shortened time, and the space is the house. Both these films are completely preoccupied with housing. In fact, Downsizing really is a large-scale piss take on the real estate video. The Incredible Shrinking Man becomes a prisoner in his house, and Downsizing advertises the theme with its titular references to trading your large home for a smaller one, and frequent allusions to middle-class, luxury, and slum housing.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll go through a few of the slides. Yeah, sorry that we missed those out. But,
okay, it's all right. Are we back in it now, or are you in it? If you
want to point out any of the slides in particular?
No, just show the pack shot on number 3. Yeah.
3, right. Sorry, this one.
The one of the 2 DVDs.
Yes, yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
can you see that? Can people see this?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, just to recap, and we'll finish here. The Incredible Shrinking Man offers an optimistic conclusion. I still exist, which is contradicted by the end title and the mushroom cloud. Downsizing offers a pessimistic conclusion. Soon the earth will purge itself of all human life, which is contradicted by the hero's choice to love in the present, in what sort of updating of It's a Wonderful Life. 60 years divide these films' rendition of the male body's shrinkage and possible extinction over time. The Incredible Shrinking Man dissolves alone into the galactic sublime. Downsizing's hero moves into a scaled-down world of similar-sized people, rendering his personal reduction invisible, something that critics didn't understand and didn't like. Where Scott's shrinking is incredible in its singularity, Paul's downsizing has become a social trend in response to the reduction of individual and global resources. Across 6 decades, easily fitting into my own lifespan, the male body keeps running out of time, but not apparently films announcing this catastrophe. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much. Sorry, I've got a couple things coming through at once. I'll I'll just respond to the comments in a second. But first of all, I would really like to welcome our next speaker, who is Dr. Francesca Sobande. Dr. Francesca Sobande is a lecturer in digital media studies and director of the BA Media, Journalism and Culture programme at Cardiff University. She is an affiliate of the Data Justice Lab and is communications co-chair with Dr. Nia Jones of the Race in the Marketplace Research Network. Francesca's work focuses on the media experiences of Black women in Britain, digital remix culture, creative work, brand woke washing, and the politics of popular culture and power. Her research has been published in international journals, including the European Journal of Cultural Studies, Marketing Theory, Television and New Media, Consumption Markets and Culture, and Communication, Culture and Critique. She's the author of the excellent book, The Digital Lives of Black Women in Britain, published by Palgrave last year, and co-editor with Professor Akugo Emejulu of To Exist is to Resist, Black Feminism in Europe from Pluto in 2019. Francesca is also co-author with Lila Roxanne Hill of Black Out Here, Black Lives in Scotland, which is someone who lived in Glasgow for 8 years I'm very much looking forward to. That's forthcoming with Bloomsbury and Z in 2022. And more information about Francesca's work is available at her website, which I'll put into the chat right now. So Francesca, if you'd like to go right ahead. And sorry, I'll stop presenting the PowerPoint now. Oh, you're on mute, I think. Yeah, you haven't unmuted yourself.
Is it working now?
Yes, great.
Perfect. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. My internet connection's been playing up, so if at any point the audio drops, please let me know. I was just saying I'm really delighted to be taking part in this today and feel really honoured to have been asked to contribute to this conversation and to get to learn from everybody who has made this happen. I recognise it's an incredibly challenging time for everyone, and there's a huge amount of work that goes into organising something such as this, so I just wanted to express my gratitude. When thinking about the overall theme that really underpins the conference, I found myself coming back to questions to do with in what ways do TV, film and screen depictions mark or mould a sense of time? And also, how does the different ways and the different moments in time, the questions to do with sort of when, where and why someone chooses to view a certain depiction or on-screen representation, how does that also impact the relationship between time that might be tapped into as part of that? So a lot of my work has focused on the media experiences of Black women in Britain, and in particular an emphasis on Black women's digital experiences. And more recently, I've been exploring different digitally remixed depictions of famous men. So looking at this concept of the internet's boyfriend, which famous men are framed as being desired, admired, idealized, and what does that tell us about contemporary norms related to masculinity, race, gender, and class? Initially, when thinking about what I'd say today, I sort of pondered over whether or not it would be helpful to speak a bit about how the famous men we see constantly remediated in the form of GIFs or memes, how that is telling us something to do with the relationship between time, the relationship between the body, or more specifically, which bodies, whose bodies. But ultimately, I often just found myself coming back to right now, everything that is happening right now and everything that's been going on for the last year or so. So for that reason, I really just want to spend a little bit of time, there's that word again, speaking about the pandemic, speaking about time, and also I was really reflecting on some of my own experiences when it came to viewing TV, viewing film, how that was marking a sense of time during days that were otherwise sort of endless. The concept of morning, afternoon, evening and night has really altered, even when thinking about key moments, whether that might be to do with birthdays. It's going to be my 30th this year, and what does it mean to be experiencing these late stages of being in my 20s with all that is going on, and often in ways that involve me connecting with friends at a distance and family members by viewing things collectively online. So TV, film and screen studies have really shed light on the relationship between these industries and understandings and experiences of time and embodiment. And recently I've been thinking about all of this in relation to COVID-19 and thinking about how people's sense and experience of time has been impacted by the pandemic. I've also been reflecting on how screen depictions of different people and their bodies during this time have contributed to various narratives, including the quickly constructed term essential worker and key worker, which often functions in ways that are inherently gendered, raced and classed. So whose bodies are spectacularized right now? Whose bodies are framed as good or bad? Or whose bodies are invisibilized as well? Many people are speaking about life before the pandemic, during it, and looking to a future that has sometimes been referred to as post-COVID or a post-COVID time. For some people, nostalgic TV, film, and media viewing, and I count myself as very much being part of this group, has played a key part in the way that they've reflected on or sometimes reconnected with the past. Images of a time before have been a huge source of comfort, and suddenly many TV, film, and screen representations of people together, moving around and in busy settings, have taken on new meanings and have become markers of a time when. So a time when certain experiences were possible, when bodies were moving in different ways, and a time which is very different to right now. TV, film, and screen depictions continue to convey how the same period of time is felt, experienced, and remembered in many different ways by many different people and in different places. Misguided notions of universal experiences or universal notions of the body, what it is to live, embodied lived experiences. Misguided universal notions of all of this are often effectively challenged by work in the TV, film, and screen industries, which offer audiences the chance to experience moments of connection, relationality, and even forms of self-searching and recognition and self-affirmation, but while learning and thinking about the specific nature of other people's lives and how they are impacted by key moments in time. I'm going to leave it there, and as I said, I'm really looking forward to hearing other people's thoughts on time, the body, film, TV, and screen studies, and thanks again for inviting me to be a part of this conversation today.
Well, thank you very, very much for being part of it and for letting us know it's your 30th birthday soon, not without a hint of jealousy. I thought it was against the law to be under 30. Well done. So happy birthday for that. We'll continue moving on through the speakers, and then we will have time for debate amongst the speakers and with the audience as well. Next, I want to introduce in absentia Davina Quinlivan, unfortunately, who isn't able to be here personally because of a very important family issue that's going on this week. So she's given me something to read out on her behalf. First of all, to introduce her, Dr. Davina Quinlivan is Senior Lecturer in Critical Historical Studies at Kingston University. She's the author of 6 monographs, 3 forthcoming. They include The Spirit of the Beehive with BFI, Joanna Hogg, New British Art Cinema, Female Identity and Aesthetics with EUP, The Inner Cinema of Deborah Levy, Intertextuality, Feminine Imagination and Embodiment, Filming the Body in Crisis, Trauma, Healing and Hopefulness, and The Place of Breath in Cinema. Don't know where she gets the time to do all of that, but there we go. She's resident expert in film at the Wallace Collection and the Freud Museum. And her title is My Imagined Images Will Never Be Yours, which is also dedicated to her PhD supervisor, Sarah Cooper, who I hope is also in the audience. Davina and I both had the privilege of being at King's College together, and Davina was supervised by Sarah at the time. So this is dedicated to you. And she would like to say that from a very young age, I sought out certain films as a means through which to negotiate, affirm, or acknowledge things which didn't make sense to me, enabling comprehension of a world slightly off kilter from others. As a child, I was fascinated with merchant ivory productions, films such as A Passage to India or Shakespeare Walla, because they invoked somehow the rituals of an empire my parents knew very well as children born in Burma, schooled in convents and monasteries across Asia. These films haunted me as embalmed reminders of a colonial past, which I had not lived through, but still proliferated the edges of my life. I knew no other Anglo-Asian children and experienced the typical in-betweenness of this predicament. The trauma of their own foreignness and alienation as immigrants in West London remained unspoken for both my parents. Since they did not speak about this, I carried it within me throughout my childhood, experienced again as a first trauma rather than inherited conflict. In her book Queer Phenomenology, Sarah Ahmed writes about the importance of orientation in thinking through lived experience and the ways queer identity is about orientation, attending to the spaces and temporalities felt through the body. The word orientation also has a colonial implication. To face the same way, towards the West, is a physical adjustment, which also represents what it is like to be colonized through the body. Residual traces of once colonized voices now colonize my own child's body, as they had mine. Inherited histories of trauma loosen and become friable, mutable, the more we travel along these lines of power and reclaim the body and mind. Over time, this colonization of the body, engendered through DNA, comes to represent a more tender geography, and our lineal likeness, as it finds its way to the surface of the present, is a map of the power we hold inside ourselves. What about other kinds of transformations which exist beyond the biological, the genealogical? Is not the body-mind multiple? How are these changes marked in time, in the bodies of our future selves, like the differing wood on the rings of a tree? Imagine then a forest of trees, trying not to imagine the sequoias in Hitchcock's Vertigo, or Kelly Reichardt's Woodland Territories. In her essay on dendrochronology, the dating of trees, Jessica J. Lee observes the varying colours of wood inside a tree, noticing how, I quote, the scars of a heart shake cut across its inner rings, a marker of transformation. How are my own familial scars and transformations from generation to generation mapped out? For trees, duration grows out in pools of movement, but it also registers the past in every new gesture of life. Time then is a circular experience. Duration passes as a cyclical movement, a spinning, a rotation. Growth makes itself apparent in the shape of a circle. A forest of trees represents then time on a horizontal level, as well as the vertical. Not only this, but time is intensified at various points, older trees mingling with the saplings. Time is a circular symphony, so I twirl around, and my children too, as they gather up the loops of my father's dance. Under the mango trees in Rangoon, he danced, and we followed. A cinema of time and the body, combined with the work of our imagination, collective and individual, leaves a forested future of images of our future, living along the lines of the present and the analog sensations of the past. Well, thanks very much to Davina for that. For anyone who has just walked in, I was reading out the words there of Davina, who unfortunately sends her deepest apologies that she can't be here. So moving on now to our final speaker before we move into discussion and Q&A. Professor Michael Williams is Professor in Film at the University of Southampton. He's the author of 2 monographs examining uses of the ancient past in constructing screen stardom. They are Film Stardom and the Ancient Past, Idols, Artifacts and Epics from Palgrave in 2018, and Film Stardom, Myth and Classicism, The Rise of the Hollywood Gods in 2013. He is widely published, I don't know where I'm going with that, Foucauldian entry into my thinking there. He is widely published on stardom, sexuality and history on screen, and is also author of Ivan Novello, Screen Idol with BFI in 2003. And co-editor of British Silent Cinema and the Great War from Palgrave in 2011. He is currently co-editing a collection on Call Me By Your Name, along with Edward Lamberti. So, Michael, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thanks, Louis. Hopefully it won't be too punishing. Let me just try and share some images. So, sorry, there's a bit more PowerPoint to go, but we're nearly there. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Louis, BAFTSS and everyone involved for organising such a wonderful event. Louis suggested that I focus on my research on stardom and classicism in relation to the conference theme. So I put together a brief and possibly very random series of thoughts and hopefully evocative images for you. I was first struck by links between film stardom and classical myth and iconography, primarily in fan magazines, back when I was researching British silent idol Ivan Novello, who you see here. Here he was heralded as England's Apollo in fan magazine publicity, a statement confidently asserted but accompanied by a knowing wink to the reader, as Parker Tyler and Edgar Moran suggested such divinising discourse should not be taken seriously, but it's not merely a manner of speaking. As with this piece in the Daily Telegraph, Novello's absurdly handsome look demanded comment. Novello might be a Greek statue of a young athletic poet brought to life, it argues here, and myth seemed the best way to do the talking. Novello once said that the more essentially modern you are, the more old-fashioned you can afford to be, and it seems to be the use of classical myth and star discourse as an extreme example of this. So this conjugation of ancient and modern predates cinema, of course, but one can find a developing discourse of the film star in US and UK press, adding references to Apollos and Venuses by the early 1910s. The Media History Digital Library and other digital platforms greatly aided such research, particularly when I widened out this research later. Here we find a poem describing James Cruise as resembling the Apollo Belvedere, and Norma Talmadge posing as the winged Victoria Samothrace atop a decidedly modern motor car. Fabulously, she's described here as carved out of herself, which I love. So prose, as with Cruise, or pose, as with Norma Talmadge, compares a star to a classical deity, or more specifically, a sculpture well known in popular culture. There are several tropes of such imagery. One is pedestal swapping. The star is the modern incarnation of an ancient deity. It's taken playfully literally by Herbert Howe here for photoplay, suggesting that the Apollo Belvedere should apologise for having occupied his pedestal for so long, and Roman Navarro should now take his place. In Picture Plays The Greek God from Mexico, that headline is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this heralding of the star's pulchritude and iconic status while navigating the Mexican Navarro star image through contemporary xenophobia. His ethnic otherness constructed as a kind of authenticating patina. Meanwhile, references to Alexander the Great and Antinous, lover of Hadrian, both enable and disavow readings of Navarro's homosexuality. Who wins out in this 1922 iconic duel between Gloria Swanson and the Venus de Milo? Swanson is resplendently contemporary in costume, while drapery emulates the statue and the star's pose embodies it. Yet she remains anchored to the Venus somehow, opening a space of reflection. The Venus has been received as a symbol of ancient beauty and art, but is here also a copy, as is Swanson, of it. Further showing the workings of such imagery is my enduring favourite Photoplay's 1928 Olympus Moves to Hollywood feature. Richard Arlen and Joan Crawford gamely posing as Apollo and Venus. The magazine helpfully including dotted lines with exact measurements to show how the stars compare, as well as adding a classical fig leaf of respectability. Ironically, the ancient is used to commodify youth here. The point is, I would argue, that stars are both young and old, avatars of an industry marketing itself as being of the now and of the future, but one that is here reassuringly rooted in Western constructs of art and civilization. In a contrasting image of pedestal swapping, we have this promotional still of Rita Hayworth for Down to Earth, a film in which she plays the Greek muse Terpsichore. In contrast to some of the static poses we have seen, this one is fascinating for how it plays into Hayworth's image as a dancer. Foregrounding movement and action, there's arguably something defiant here about Hayworth effectively striding from the contemporary love goddess pedestal on which she was otherwise being objectified, connecting with Adrienne MacLean's work on the star. More recently, and another note on performance, we have sculptural poses of a different kind in Call Me By Your Name, which I spoke about at BAFTSS a couple of years ago, a film that rehearses a queer history of classical reception in its tale of a 1980s love affair between two men. Where fan poems and letters had signalled awareness of such ancient and modern connections in the 1920s, here's social media found commentators producing some striking observations and fan art digital collages merging bodies across time. Another different example, when Caitlyn Jenner came out as a trans woman on the cover of Vanity Fair in 2015, it was the body of Venus that was appropriated to articulate this moment, which we've seen in other guises before. In the era of the selfie, there are new ways of framing oneself against the past. A year earlier, Beyonce and Jay-Z visited the Louvre, inserting their bodies into the visual history of Western art and culture. This is a repetition with difference, an intervention into the use of the ancient past to construct discourses of beauty and whiteness, one that continued in the couple's Apeshit music video in 2018. As classical scholars such as Mary Beard have argued, there is no one classical, and classicism itself is a history of copies, simultaneously recreations and creations. And as you might notice at the bottom there, I've added a nod to the sculptural references in Barbara Sadler and Lindsay Steenberg's papers to Poldark and Pompeii, just to add another dimension to this imagery. In all of these images, sculptural and cinematic, past and present bodies shape each other archaeologically and place new frames around the past. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much, and a big round of applause for all of those extremely interesting, extremely well thought out contributions there on ideas of time and the body in film, television and screen studies. Now, as I expected, I can't think of any way of tying all of those five together apart from the theme of time and the body. I'd like to throw it open both to our main speakers, but also to the floor as well. No one's put any questions into the chat, but anyone who wants to ask anything, either to all of the panel or to individual panel members, please go ahead. So we've got one comment here, which is from, sorry, it's not quite opened up for me yet. Apology, I can see that there's been a comment, although I can't see who it's from. So Christina Wilkins, really interesting ideas there, and from Jade, wonderful, thank you. I don't know if either of you want to actually elaborate on that at all, if you've got something specific that you want to say.
Would I be able to ask Michael to kind of expand? You talked about the discourses of whiteness. I'm kind of interested there on what else you could say.
Yeah, I think that comes down to, if you think of particularly for the last 200 or so years, and how the classical body, particularly through sculptures being constructed and painting as well, but sculptures seem to embody that notion of kind of whiteness and beauty ever since so Johann Winkelmann's kind of work, and that's a very constructed version of the past and of whiteness. So particularly looking at kind of marble and whiteness, how a lot of those marbles, which archaeology's been working on a lot in the last decade or so, in terms of recovering the colour that's been lost from the original sculptures and how they would have been painted, quite lavishly decorated in the past, which would look quite jarring to us, having received this kind of whitened version of those particular sculptures. And also this, in terms of representation, that the ancient world would be obviously much more diverse than those particular representations that have been selected, and a certain canonical version of the past and certain versions of male beauty and female beauty that come to us that way. And I think looking at these references to Venus or Apollo, you're kind of looking back through all those layers of reception, and it includes that racial aspect of kind of whiteness that's been kind of layered onto these images, which is why when you get something like, so Beyonce's visits the Louvre, that is a kind of reframing of that past. And there's several articles already about that particular moment. It's really interesting, very complicated as well in terms of cultural prestige and value, but it is putting new bodies into that very valorized kind of space of the museum there. So it is a kind of challenge to all of that, and also the fact that it's also about there's a Beyonce's use of Instagram and that sense of framing yourself in that particular space, and via social media being able to intervene in that history. And so you've got the history of the Grand Tour as part of that as well, where you would go to kind of Europe and be framed and painted in those kind of spaces. So it is a new way of engaging, perhaps playfully, with that past, but it has a meaning to it as well. So I think there's a lot going on with that kind of notion of whiteness, if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks. We've got a couple of questions here in the chat as well. Very happy to read any of these out, although it's always nice to hear different voices. Jade, do you want to ask your question?
Hey, yes, so I just wondered for Michael if there's any other examples in kind of contemporary stardom where stars have kind of been framed within this idea of antiquity. And obviously you've used a few examples of the classic stars, and then you had Caitlyn Jenner as well. I was wondering if there's any other iconic uses of that, because I can't think of any, but I wasn't sure if you knew of any.
I think there are some around. I mean, that, I think kind of Vanity Fair, and I mean, Annie Leibovitz in particular does like using kind of myth in that kind of way and creating quite bold images. Obviously, a lot to talk about with her as well. But that was I think quite a kind of clear use of that imagery of Venus with the pose, and like with the Gloria Swanson image, there's an element of kind of replicating the pose of the body. I think you see it a lot in advertising, particularly because I think the one thing I was looking at was when you look in the 20s and fan magazines, it's the way they use kind of images and that discourse, which is still evolving about stardom. It's quite easy to find kind of examples, really. And it's not that it disappears later on, it just kind of shifts a bit into other forms and sometimes becomes a bit more implicit. And there's an argument that stardom has more confidence in itself, and as an industry in constructing stardom at that point. So in a way, you don't have to hold the hand of the viewer, the reader, so overtly in making those connections to the past. I think there are other examples. I mean, as I said, there are a couple of other papers at this conference that look at, like Sir Lindsay Steenberg's work at the ancient body, how it appears, particularly with sort of ancient epics. So there you've got a very direct connection to it. But I think there are more implicit ones. And if you search for key terms online, that's often a way that you can find a lot of these kind of images. So I'm trying to think of others, but I could find them. So I'll let you know sort of later about them. So, but I think it's still there. It's just, it goes in slightly different directions. It's often more implicit. You're often more likely to find it in advertising in some ways. But thanks, Jade.
Thanks. And Lucy, if you've finished eating that apple, do you want to ask your question?
Hang on, yes, that was true. Yeah, thank you. Deborah, I wanted to ask you, I was quite struck actually by that incredible dynamic of poor Carrie Fisher being confronted with her young minuscule self in a bikini having to sign it, and the idea that there's some resentment towards her. But I thought, thinking in terms of time and the body, what other factors in relation to time and the body play into that sort of dynamic, as in, she's got that iconic role when she's so young. Someone like Judi Dench, perhaps, or Helen Mirren, whose iconic roles came to them older, might not be in such a position. It could happen to a guy as well, I'm sure, like Daniel Radcliffe will get given pictures of himself as Harry Potter when he's in his 60s, probably. So I just thought, and also, is it more prevalent in a certain era, would you say, now than it would have been in earlier decades, or is it a bit better now? I'm just wondering, in relation to time and the body and era, what other factors play in other than just being an aging woman?
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on there, and if you are interested in this, ideas around how aging women's stars experience these pressures, that section of the Princess Diarist is really fascinating. She speaks like very candidly and very movingly, really, about this sort of discombobulation of being constantly asked to sign these pictures of herself as a very young woman, and all the sort of judgment that's tied up in that at the same time. I think there's a few things going on in terms of Carrie Fisher's experience. I was just jotting down some notes when I saw your question pop up. Partly, I think it's about the intensity of the fandom surrounding Star Wars. So she talks about the kinds of encounters she has with people sort of like coming to her with this really kind of profound preconceived ideas of what they want that encounter to be like, for example. So she's dealing with all of that. I think it's also particularly about fetishization of her, in particular in that image of her in the gold bikini in Return of the Jedi, and she mentions the frequency with which that's the picture that she's asked to sign, and I think it's about her being so closely tied to a single role, so that whereas I know other women stars might have more of a range of these experiences of being asked to remember these different roles. Spoken very profound as well about this constant return to being Princess Leia and the effect of that. And there's also questions of intergenerationality, because she talks about how she, in these signings, that she meets with, what would have been the young fans of when the film, at the time the film came out. So, around her age or younger than her, but then also them or the newer fans bringing their kids along, and so being like meeting much younger fans who know the early films and expect to meet Princess Leia and instead meet her. And she gives a whole anecdote about meeting a 4-year-old girl who gets really upset when she's told she's going to meet Princess Leia, and then she meets Carrie Fisher as a woman in her 50s, and how sort of distressing that was to this child and how she dealt with it. But yeah, there's so many threads going on there, and I think what makes it particularly gendered, of course, is when Daniel Radcliffe is asked to look at those photos, perhaps he won't be dealing with the same kinds of scrutiny around, well, you let yourself go, you know, yes, you age, but she talks very much about how, like, she's perceived to have failed at aging because she looks her age. Yeah, thank you, Lucy.
Okay, thanks. The questions are coming in pretty thick and fast now, so I'm going to try and organise them according to who's being questioned. So I've got another one for Deborah, then a couple of questions for Mandy, and then a few for Francesca as well, and then we could maybe end with those final few for Michael. And Agnieszka, I can see that your hand's up as well. So I think that'll be the order that we'll do things in. Gul, if you'd also like to ask your question to Deborah, then go ahead, or I can read it out if you like.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, let me find my question. I forgot what I asked. Oh, okay, I remember. Thank you so much for your talk. I can turn my video on. There it is. Hi. They're all fascinating. I can ask anyone, but this one is for Deborah. Obviously, as a society, we are making a lot of mistakes, and also following the lead of media, because it's actually kind of fun and interesting to, say, compare photographs of aging women in film industry, etc. So my question is more about what can be done. You know, with other issues about color, gender, age, etc., we talk about how we can change the language we use, how we can be more sensitive about different aspects of reacting to those media articles, or could there be something that the film industry can do within the filmmaking processes? What would you advise to this audience?
Thank you, Gul. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, definitely one of the problems is language, looking for language, and perhaps that right at the start, just by using the phrase older, which would seem to be perhaps, you know, less contentious than a lot of the language, but which is still really problematic. So, and yeah, that's something that you know, aging studies scholars are grappling with all the time, which I think is bleeding more into kind of media and film and TV. Cultural studies, you know, for example, the term elderly still gets used really quite widely, but certainly with aging studies, there's a real kind of pushback against that, and we need to see that happening much more widely. So yes, language is important, but in a sense, you know, the problems surrounding this are the problems of the media and inclusivity and diversity much more broadly. You know, it's to do with casting, it's to do with who's working in production, who holds, you know, power. We have to change culture, I think, before we can look to you know, great changes within film and television. But of course, you know, film and television is part culture. How do we separate them? How do we, you know, who do we look to first to make changes? But yeah, so that's a huge ongoing challenge. I wish I had more answers to it, but yeah, thank you, Gul.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got Tom May. Sorry that I missed your comment earlier. It was a little bit further up the comment thread. But Tom May, you had a comment for Mandy. And then Nick Jones has one as well. And if you get the chance, I can see that both Eve and Agnieszka have their hands up. If it's possible to just put in the comment thread who it's for, just so that we can kind of arrange it. Thank you. So Tom?
I think it was more of a point rather than a question, really. Yeah, we move on to the next one.
No, okay. All right. Well, I'll read. See if I can read out the point, which was that. Where are we? Oh, sorry, still going up threads. Thanks for an insightful talk, Mandy. The Incredible Shrinking Man is a great film. I agree, it is. I saw it a couple of months ago. It points towards the style of CBS's TV anthology series, The Twilight Zone, a few years later. Richard Matheson provides the link. I don't know if you've got any comment on that. And then we could have Nick Jones.
Yes, that's right. You know, he does. And there's lots more to say about Richard Matheson, but actually to try to hew back into the discussion that's ongoing, I think it's interesting how Francesca raised the question of how to understand commemoration of her own birthday in the time of a pandemic when publicness is put on one side. It's been coming up today because of the death of Prince Philip. And indeed, I have already, because I edited a book on monarchy representations, been contacted by the press and asked what I think about how Harry would be feeling, as though I would possibly have any idea. But what's intriguing, and it's said over and over again already in the news commentary, is the way that Philip's biography bookends everybody else's, because he was 100 years old and everybody's is fitted into it, in the way that I was interested in the way that my biography bookended the two versions of male shrinking in the two films 60 years apart that I was talking about. What I'm getting at is really temporality and reference, and the way that lifespan becomes a form of reference and can be put, as Deborah said, into temporal vertigo. And I think this is going to be said over and over again, Jonathan Friedland has already said it about the Queen, that why the Queen was such a success and such an important film was because basically it connected the contemporary public in 2006 when it came out, and laterally with the one public figure that subtends Britain's only sense of its glory and importance, that is World War II. Yeah. And that when we lose figures like that, in some sense, we lose that biographical reference point and orientation point. Yeah. And just to finish with that, in regard to Michael's point about how many more sculptural references we can put, at the end of The Queen, when Helen Mirren is talking to Tony Blair about the Queen is talking about what does the public expect of her after the unhappiness over her response to the death of Diana. And she stands first in front of a classical nude. This is supposed to be in the corridor going into the garden at Buckingham Palace, and says something about not feeling she should emote, that she should wear her heart on her sleeve. And then she goes and stands in front of a statue of a Victorian statesman saying, what I felt I should do, et cetera, was be reserved. But the public seems to want something different. And there's a very direct reference to these sculptural works as citations of, if you like, persona options for her. Yeah.
So thank you. We're getting slightly time conscious, and I don't mean in a conceptual way, but just in a basic chronological way, because we do actually have to have the announcements of the awards after this session as well. So I'll just read out Gul's question, which was also for Mandy, and then Nick Jones, if you could make your point relatively briefly for Mandy as well, that would be great. But Gul wants to know, would you agree, Mandy, when I say we are defined by our surroundings, and by getting smaller, we change, and our lives change because of our transformed environment? And then, Nick, do you want to ask your question, and maybe Mandy can take them both together?
Sure.
Well,
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Who first?
Well, maybe Nick, you could go first, and then Mandy, if you could take both those questions.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the question in the chat, Mandy, but thank you for the talk. And I was just I'm mentioning intentionality and the fact that in the 1950s, he shrinks by accident, whereas in the 2010s, the male ego is expected to shrink as part of a kind of neoliberal coercion. And here maybe I can point to Louis' own fantastic work on the kind of neoliberal expectations of the contemporary era. But I'm happy to leave that as more of a kind of random comment if we need to be moving on. But that's my thought.
Okay, 2 points briefly. In regard to Nick, yes, both these films have been read as masculinity and crises films in different eras, but for similar reasons of incipient women's power, possible employment reductions, a purposelessness after the great epoch of the war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, indeed. In regard to Gul's question about size and importance and context, indeed so. And if you go back to Gulliver's Travel and its citations of Bishop Berkeley, there's a very direct reference Gulliver himself, is very big in regard to the Lilliputians, but very small in regard to another culture that he gets into. And he says, I might have been as big as that church spire, and now I'm as little as the Lilliputians were. Gosh, it all depends, doesn't it, in effect, right? And this is the relativity and scaling as the determination of size is very important in this work. Marianne Doan's new book, Bigger Than Life, I think it's going to be called, is going to reflect on that, I think, to a great degree.
Unmute myself. Right, thanks very much. So we've got quite a few questions that have come in for Francesca. So I'll just read out the names in turn if all the craziness of the chat and my internet being slow and so on can handle it. Just 1 second. Right, so for Francesca, we have questions that have come in from Michael Goddard, then Julie Wright, Andrew Phillip, and Charlotte Crofts, please. Maybe if all four could ask them in turn, that's not going to be too difficult. Actually, no, maybe you won't be able to keep track of that. I don't know. Just go individually, and then Francesca, over to you.
Well, I was first in the chat, I guess. So, hi, Francesca. Nice to see you.
Hi.
I guess my thing was, I'm just curious about this sort of idea about what exactly changed in the COVID pandemic, particularly about certain things that were, technological possibilities before, and probably some people did them, like having a Netflix watch party with people in some other location. You could do that, but people didn't really do that, or maybe only a few people did that. And also, one thing that I've been tracking a little bit for other reasons is about responders on YouTube, which of course already existed for quite some time, but it seems that there's just been a kind of explosion of responders on YouTube. From what it's really hard to tell if there's more of something on YouTube or not, but it just seems to me that things that I'm tracking, and they seem quite diverse and they seem really interesting, and they're all sorts of, teenagers and older people and people from all different ethnic groups and different classes and so forth are responding to really interesting archives of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily expect and so forth. So I just wondered if you could maybe say something a little bit more about what this kind of COVID conditions have done in terms of these, shifts in certain cultural media habits, perhaps.
Sure, thank you. I'm conscious of time, so I'll try and keep all my responses fairly brief, but I guess really a lot of this has been reflecting on the experiences that I'm having myself and the experiences of people who are very close to me. So something that I've really noticed, there's been a shift in terms of, I have a good friend in Toronto, and we might do things like watch something together at a distance, or try and create a sense of collective viewership because of that real felt physical distance. But then I have friends who don't live that far away, and normally we would meet up in person, we would communicate and come together in different ways. And I also think as the months have rolled on, it's become increasingly hard to just sometimes speak to people. And, sometimes we get tired of saying, how are you? And knowing that the answer is not very good day after day. So I think that people, of course, I wouldn't want to generalize, but certainly some people are finding that forms of collective viewing practices and forms of forging a sense of connection with somebody who they normally would have the chance to see in person. And, that there are some shifts that have occurred there. And whether that's communicating with somebody predominantly with use of memes or GIFs or emojis, or saying, I don't have the energy to have a phone call this week, but let's come together and watch a film over Netflix or Disney. I think there are definitely some changes that have occurred. Whether or not they're going to be long lasting, and there's a question mark around that.
Thanks, that's great.
Okay, so I just need to try and check who is next for Francesca. We've got Julie Wright, please. And then after Julie, if Andrew Phillip could get ready.
Just a really quick question. I was really interested when you were talking about the idea of the internet boyfriend. And I liked this idea because I was thinking about Michael's work and this kind of like historical trajectory. And I was wondering if there is something where the internet boyfriend, we could say, has this kind of fandom past that we can kind of look at that's fed into the internet. And then I was kind of started thinking about how the internet isn't just one thing and there isn't one audience. So anything that you could say about that, I would just love to hear, because I think it's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, if we had more, I would speak about it at length, but I've got a forthcoming paper in Feminist Media Studies, which is focusing on the concept of the internet's boyfriend and looking at questions to do with the transnational dynamics at play. So how the global media flows and also notions of national identity, cultural identity and racial identity feed into which famous men are held up as the so-called internet's boyfriend. And as you said, I'm really interested in who's the internet when we're talking about this. So two of the famous men I'm focusing on in this article, Timothée Chalamet and Idris Elba. And there's one really interesting example whereby people are creating content to make it clear that they are admiring Idris Elba, but they're also making it clear that the audience that they're attempting to speak for or speak to is a Black audience. So how people are creating content which communicates something about the gaze of who is watching or who is longingly looking at these famous men. And definitely I think there's a real history in terms of fandom, desirability politics, and I think without being idealistic about possibilities with digital culture, because there are a lot of faults there are moments when people are remixing content and creating new media to really push back against the norms that have been so pervasive. So calling out whiteness and calling out the who is often held up as the archetypal Hollywood man. And within all of this, as I said, I'm really fascinated by how notions of national identity feed into that. So who is viewed as relatable or familiar, and the boy next door? What does it mean that the Frenchness or Americanness of someone like Timothée Chalamet is very much part of his global appeal, and the way he's framed as a national and international treasure?
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Andrew isn't so sure about asking his question now, so we'll move on to Charlotte Cross, please, who's got a question again for Francesca about nostalgia, which is also a direct interest of mine. Actually, I've been working on that among other things too. So, Charlotte, interested to hear what you've got to say about that.
Well, first of all, thank you to the whole panel. It was really fascinating. And I was just really curious, because you've answered some of my question, about your own nostalgic viewing practices during the pandemic. Like, what did you gravitate towards? What kinds of things were you watching and how were you watching them? You talked a bit about kind of watching along with friends, but just a little bit more about that. And I was just interested, really fascinated to read that paper that you've just mentioned when it comes out. I focus on Cary Grant, who's obviously he's quite an interesting figure in terms of both whiteness and masculinity, and he circulates in different ways in different communities and in interesting ways. But he and Paul Newman apparently started trending in March 2020, and I'm just wondering if this is keying into that idea of nostalgic viewing.
Thank you. Yeah, my own nostalgic viewing. What do I want to share? I think there's definitely been a lot of harking back to the things I was watching about 15 years ago, and having lots of conversations with people who are doing similar things. So I think, really sitting with the sorts of shows or films that bring a real sense of comfort, I think precisely because they remind me of a before time. They remind me of a time before this. And also I'd say at the other end of the spectrum, a lot of horror. So I think sort of the escapism, whereby you're watching something that's actually a little bit more nightmarish than what we're experiencing right now. And in terms of the internet's boyfriend stuff, it's really great to hear more about your own work. And yeah, it's just, I think, something that I've been looking at quite a lot in relation to, whether it's someone like Harry Styles as well. There's this key interview between Chalamet and Styles where they're sort of framed as representing this new or so-called modern masculinity. And something that really frustrates me is how whiteness functions as part of this. So when there are queer Black people who are depicted in the media or who are invisibilized, it's often in incredibly degrading ways. And as soon as we see a famous white man take up or wear something that has often historically been associated with Black queer culture, it is modern, it is alternative, it is new, it's revisionist. So yeah, that was just something else I wanted to share in relation to the internet's boyfriend and thinking about sexuality politics alongside the race, class and gender nature of all what goes on.
Thanks. And you mentioned both nostalgia and horror. Dare I say it, a horror nostalgia piece like Ratchet as well, which has been one of my highlights of lockdown viewing. So I promised both Eve and Agnieszka that they would be able to ask questions. So I think Agnieszka was first. Agnieszka, are you there?
I think she's
Agnieszka? Oh, maybe not. Eve, are you there? I always get the feel of being in a radio phone-in show here. So Eve, if you're there.
Yes, thanks. This is a question that actually ties in with what some other people were writing on the chat. This is a question to Deborah about, I was interested in what you said about Carrie Fisher, and it reminded me of discourses about digital de-aging, and this is something that worked in Star Wars with her younger image, and this is also used a lot in other films. Someone in the chat mentioned Ant-Man and the de-aged Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas. This happened with Samuel L. Jackson and other actors, and someone also mentioned deepfakes. So I was wondering if that's something you looked at in your research, the use of the digital special effects and aspects of de-aging, having a star that can appear both her current age but also a younger self. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Eve. I mean, I think it is a fascinating area and not one that I've delved into, but it does. I mean, my impression is, just from being aware of like kind of media responses to some of these shows that have done this, is audiences often seem to feel quite angry about it. They feel quite unsettled by it, and there's something like there's an inauthenticity to it which is both distracting and somehow wrong. So I think, I mean, that's just an impression, and if that's true, I think that's quite interesting, because you know, we can say that all kinds of things that go on to give the illusion of youth are, you know, processes of inauthenticity. So you know, yeah, how do we sort of judge those against one another? What's the kind of hierarchy of it? But yeah, I mean, I do think it's a really fascinating arena, and it's one that I expect will become more apparent in aging studies and thinking about the kind of work that's done there. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm very, very loath to do this, especially because there are so many interesting comments in the comment box, and there's so much more to ask all of our panelists as well. But I think we'll have to draw it to a close for the panelist discussion here. I hope that everyone can stay with us, because we have, last but by no means least at all, the announcement of the various BAFTSS Awards winners, which James and other members of the BAFTSS board are going to take us through. But I'd like to say a very, very deep and heartfelt thank you to Davina Quinlivan, Mandy Merck, Deborah Jermyn, Francesca Sobande, Michael Williams, of course, everyone here who's been participating in the chat. And I'm just very, very sorry that I wasn't able to call on more people to speak, but let's do this again sometime. But James, would you like to go for it? Are you there, James?
Hello.
James,
yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you to the panelists for such an interesting session. I'm aware of the time, so please do stick around. I suspect we will be going over 6 o'clock a little bit, but I promise you that we've got some exciting stuff coming up. This is the part of the conference. And if you've been to a BAFTSS conference before, or if you follow our work, you should be familiar with our BAFTSS Awards, which are awarded for excellence in published and practice work, and are voted by members of the executive committee of BAFTSS. And we've already announced our shortlists for the various categories. And what's going to happen now is I'm going to talk you through the winners in the various categories. So bear with me while I share. Oh, am I presenting now? I think I might be. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So what I'm going to do with this is, for each category, we announced a short list of 4 items. So the one you're seeing first is for best edited collection, and so we announced this a few weeks ago. And what we're going to do in each category is announce the third place, which is the honourable mention, then the runner-up, and then the winner. And I hope this doesn't go wrong, but what I'm going to do is invite the winner or winners in each category to put their microphone and camera on and give us a quick wave and a hello. I think many of the nominees are with us today, so this could be interesting. So let's see what we've got. So for the this is for the category of best edited collection. So the third place, the honourable mention, goes to Animation and Advertising by Malcolm Cook and Kirsten Warner Thompson. Great, I can see some virtual applause. For reasons of time, you'll be able to see on the screen some blurb from, this is some comments from the judges. Don't worry, we're going to put this on the website as soon as we're done with this session, so you can read some of these comments and follow links to the sources. So well done, Malcolm and Kirsten. The runner-up, so in the second place, goes to Daniel Bilterist and Lies van der Wever for mapping movie magazines, digitization, periodicals, and cinema history. So our winner is Alison Pierce for Women Make Horror, Filmmaking, Feminism, and Genre. Alison, are you there?
Hello. Oh, that's good. Thank you very much.
So,
it's just me and my cat at the moment, so lovely. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Lovely to see you.
Okay. So there you go. So our next category is Best Monograph. And here are our 4 shortlisted works for this. Okay, so our third place goes to Nick Jones. Spaces Mapped and Monstrous, Digital 3D Cinema and Visual Culture. Well done to Nick. Our second place goes to Mario Slugan for Fiction and Imagination in Early Cinema, a philosophical approach to film history. And our winner is Priya Jayakumar from the University of Southern California. And I know it's very early where Priya is. I don't know, are you there, Priya?
Hi, I'm here. Thank
Hello.
you so much. This means so much to me to get this from BAFTSS. I'm really honored. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
That's wonderful. And I think it is, I think where you're calling from, it is before 9 o'clock, isn't it?
It's close to 10 now, but I've been watching the last panel. It was really great. Thanks to everybody for presenting, and I really enjoyed this.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Priya. So our next category is for Best Article. So again, these are our 4 shortlisted articles. So our third place, honourable mention, goes to Grazia Angrivale for Allegories of the Past, Nitrate Films Aura in Post-Industrial Rochester, NY. The runner-up goes to Melanie Self for Use the Songs to Sell Your Show. I enjoyed seeing a version of this in one of the panels today. And our winner is Helen Wickley for Haunted Television, Trauma and the Spectre in the Archive. Now, this seems appropriate. Are you there, Helen?
Yes.
Is there anyone there?
I can join the BAFTSS seance. Thank you. That's so lovely. Thanks, James.
Take care. And that's a fantastic image, which I took from your article, by the way, but we'll move on because it's extremely, extremely disturbing. So the final publication award is for Best Doctoral Article or Chapter. So, and these are our 4 shortlisted works. So third place, the honourable mention, goes to Stephen Roberts for his chapter, Widescreen Pyrotechnics, Shot Composition and Staging the Cold War Films of Joseph Losey and Sidney J. Fury. Well done, Stephen. Our runner-up, Hannah Pavek, Taciturn Masculinities, Radical Quiet and Sounding Linguistic Difference in Valenska Grisbach's Western. Well done. So our winner is Mao Dong for Singapore as Non-Place, National Cinema Through the Lens of Temporal Heterogeneity. I think I've said that right. Mao, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Oh, that's really exciting. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. So there we have the publication awards. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Charlotte Crofts, who has been overseeing the awards for practice work. So I am going to control the PowerPoint, Charlotte, but I'm sure you can take it from here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, marvellous. So we had 3 categories, which you can see there, and I'm going to tell you who the nominees are, and we just had a runner-up and a winner. So the first category is audiovisual practice research, and the nominees are Husband and Wife by M&M Hawkins from London South Bank University, a short film about ice by Adam Leahy, University of the West of England, and The Deathless Woman by Ros Mortimer. And the runner-up is Ros Mortimer. Congratulations, Ros. I think you've been at the conference. And then the winner is Adam Leahy. I don't know if Adam's here. Are you here?
Hi, I am. Hello.
Congratulations, Adam.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, everyone there. Am I where?
In ice. Are you
no,
in the
not in ice. I'm by the sea. Well, it's kind of the sea. It's Burnham-on-Sea, quite close to Bristol, with my family having fish and chips. That's a really nice thing to hear. Thank you all very much for voting for the film.
Fabulous piece of work. Well done.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, the next category is the Innovation Award. And the nominees are Italia Terremotata, Dr. Paola Di Gispontonio, sorry for the pronunciation, and Dr. Fabrizio Galese. And then the next one is Beth Johnson, Industry Voices, and Paths Untold, Sketches of Southeastern Asian Filmmaking Careers by Nico Mesner. And the runner-up is Paths Untold. Congratulations, a wonderful project bringing together lots of short micro documentaries looking at Southeast Asian filmmakers. But the winner is, so it's Italia Terremotata. This is a really, really innovative project using all sorts of different technologies. I'm not going to read that out. You can read it. And I think, James, we will post these slides at some point so people can read them all at their leisure. And the next category is the Videographic Film Criticism Award. And these are the nominees. So we have Cormac Donnelly for Panscan Venkman. We've got Ian Garwood for Indie Vinyl. And Judith Rafissa for Caressing Dialogical Encounter. And the runner-up is Judith Rafesna. Sorry for mispronunciation. And the winner is Ian Garwood for Indie Vinyl. I don't know if you're in the room, Ian.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. Oh, thanks so much. And thanks for inventing the category as well. It's really nice to have this corner of screen studies recognised. Yeah, so thanks so much.
Congratulations and well done, everybody, to all the winners.
Okay, so we're going to hand over now to Liz Watkins, who is going to talk us through the PGR poster winners.
Hello. Firstly, just a quick thank you to Billy Errington and Emma Morton for facilitating discussion with the poster presenters in the PGR workshop this year. And thank you to all of our PGR researchers for participating. They've offered some genuinely interesting insight into the exciting range of research topics, from intoxicated bodies in an early cinema to the Heritage House and far more. So this year, 188 BAFTSS members voted in the postgraduate research poster competition. The results in reverse order are Joint honourable mention to both Charlie Thorpe, Sheffield Hallam University, for her poster Representations of Mental Health Documentaries, and to Georgia Brown, Queen Mary University of London, for her poster on Vivian Lee, Appointment Diaries Analysis, Total Number of Appointments by Category. And the runner-up, we have Zoe Burgess, University of Southampton, Gender and Class in the Film Collection of the Amateur Film and Sound Archive. Our winning poster of the BAFTSS Postgraduate Research Poster Showcase 2021, and the £100 prize goes to Laura Miner, University of Leeds, for her poster Reconfiguring the Unruly Woman in British TV Comedy. Brilliant work. Thank you. Is Laura there? Say hello.
Hi, I'm here.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Well done. Brilliant stuff.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you. As your hand back to James.
Thanks. If you saw my opening speech about 2 days ago, I introduced myself as the chair of the executive committee of BAFTSS. That's no longer the case as of around lunchtime today, when we had the closing of our council elections, which means we've got a number of new people who are arriving onto the executive committee. And we also have a handover in the roles of vice chair and chair. Rather neatly, the previous chairs, well, I was the previous chair, and Charlotte, who you've just seen, was vice chair. Liz, who you've just seen, is now the vice chair of the association. And our new chair, as of now, is Sir Connie Lane, who should be hopefully here, who's going to speak to us now.
Thanks, James. What an amazing year. My God, it's been so incredibly exciting. Firstly, I think it's only right that we all thank Louis and his amazing team at University of Southampton for what has been just an incredible conference and really brought alive the digital space. So thank you, Louis, and your team. It's been absolutely incredible. Next, of course, I think it's only important that we thank not only James as outgoing chair for doing an absolutely cracking job as long as I've been on the EC. He's been absolutely incredible, and to Charlotte Crofts as vice chair as well. They have led us in the most difficult of times, I think, but in a stellar fashion. So, and the association is all the better for it. So thank you to Charlotte and to James. I also want to thank the other members of the EC who are standing down. They've served the association well. We are in rude health. This conference is testament to that. So I want to thank those outgoing members of the EC. And of course, I want to welcome our new members as well, those who've been voted in today. I want to thank you for obviously offering your time and your dedication to the association, and we're facing into, as I say, a wonderful future. On a final note, I just want to say thank you for your support, and I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years in this role. It's going to be very exciting, so please do, let's have those conversations. Let's talk about the development of the association. I think that's going to be very exciting and very timely. So we will see you next year in St Andrews. Looking forward to that very much. I'm going to hand back to James now.
Are we going to read the new members out?
Yeah, I think that would be absolutely lovely, actually. James, I think you have the list.
I think I just shared the screen. Bear with
you did.
a second. It's disappeared.
Do you want me to read it? I can see them. I guess you can all read them, but congratulations to the incoming ordinary members, Gabor, Sanita, Maria, Davina, Shripali and Mao. Good luck with keeping this ship steaming forward under the leadership of Saoirse and Elizabeth.
Thank you, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. And yes, congratulations to Elizabeth as well.
Okay, well, it seems to have defaulted to me to bring this to a close. So I'm going to do that. I think we've had a lot of celebration and thanks there to our panelists, to our members, to everyone who's contributed to the conference. So as we've heard already, our next conference is in St Andrews. Watch this space for whether it will be a virtual one or a blended one, or we don't know, but we'll announce that shortly. So goodbye and good night, everybody.
Congratulations. Well done.
everyone. See you in St Andrews.
Bye, everybody. See you in St Andrews.
Thanks to Louis.